Have you ever felt like there is a pain inside you that no one sees? A type of anguish that doesn't scream but consumes, that leaves no marks on the outside but tears on the inside. It's like being trapped inside yourself, surrounded by internal voices that don't stop, as if the silence screams louder than the noise of the world. And the scariest thing is that you learn to live with it. Learn to smile when inside you are imploding. You learn to say everything is fine when in fact nothing is. You wake up, breathe, live, but you don't feel life, and worse, you start to believe that maybe God has forgotten about you. But what if I told you that it wasn't by chance that you got here? That there is a much deeper spiritual reason behind this anguish that insists on visiting you night after night? What if Jesus wanted to speak to you right now and reveal a spiritual secret that has been ignored by many, forgotten by others, and hidden from your heart for too long? Few people know this, but there is an invisible, silent, and extremely destructive cycle that operates in thousands of souls today, including the most believing, the most spiritual, those who pray, fast, and still feel that something inside them is broken. This cycle has no name in medical diagnosis, but it has spiritual roots, and it can only be broken when the truth is revealed. And this truth will be revealed today because Jesus speaks to you. Yes, with you who no longer know how to deal with this pain, who feel like you are in pieces even though you are trying to keep yourself together, who has already prayed, cried, tried to understand, and yet you continue in this darkness that no one understands. Jesus not only sees what no one else sees, but he also knows the path that will get you out of there. But before showing the way, he wants to prepare your heart. Because what you're going to hear here is no ordinary explanation. It's an awakening, a spiritual revelation that can change your soul forever. But you need to be ready, because there are truths that only heal after they tear. Take a deep breath. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine Jesus approaching now with his eyes full of compassion. He came to talk to you, and what he will reveal is something that few have had access to until today. Something that can break this cycle of invisible anguish that imprisons you inside. So if you feel that this message is for you, enjoy this video now as an act of faith and surrender. Because this light can make this word reach someone who is about to give up. And if you want to receive more messages like this, subscribe to the channel now. But most of all, I stay here because what you hear could be the answer your soul has always been searching for. Now that you've felt the weight of this pain that almost no one sees, take a deep breath, because what you are about to experience here is more than a video. It is an encounter with heaven. Jesus speaks to you, yes, with you who thought you were alone. With you who once thought that this anguish was weakness or perhaps punishment. It is not. There is a spiritual secret that will be revealed. But first, I want to ask you something with faith. If this message is already touching your heart, enjoy this video now as an act of evangelization. This is not just a click. It's a seed you plant in the life of someone who may be on the edge. Like, share and subscribe to the channel so that this word of liberation reaches those who are silent, begging for help. And write in the comments now with courage and faith, this anguish does not define me. Jesus is with me. Because when you write, declare and activate your faith, something starts to move in the spiritual world. Many will read your comment and feel strength just knowing they are not alone. Jesus is raising an army of tired hearts, but willing to believe again. And you are part of it. You are not here by chance. You were brought to this message by a divine purpose. Get ready because God may speak directly to you today, and he will. But listen, Jesus revealed something very important about this pain you feel, and you need to hear it before you leave this video. Something that can break this cycle that imprisons you inside. Now take a deep breath, close your eyes if you want, and stay with me. Because the first story that Jesus will use to talk to you starts now. The temple was silent, but inside Anna, there was a cry that no one could hear. She was there, kneeling in the middle of a sacred place, but her soul seemed to scream in silent despair that not even her eyes could express. His lips moved, but his voice didn't come out. It was as if his pain had turned into a language that the world around him didn't understand. And even so, she continued there, crying with a bitter spirit, with a broken heart, with an anguish that couldn't be explained. It could only be felt. The Bible says that Hannah prayed to the Lord and wept profusely. It was no ordinary cry. It was a soulful cry, the kind of pain that no one sees but that burns inside like a fire hidden under the ashes. And maybe you are like that now, standing on the outside but crumbling on the inside. Living like Anna with a broken spirit, trying to explain the pain that you yourself don't understand. Why does it hurt so much? Why does this emptiness insist on returning? Why does it feel like even if you do everything right, the weight still won't come off your shoulders? Anna wasn't just dealing with a physical problem. It was something spiritual, an invisible pain that gnawed at her from the inside out and that no one else could access. Eli, the priest, seeing her praying in silence, thought she was drunk. This shows how much Anna's pain was misunderstood, even by those who should understand. Just like many people today look at you and think that everything is fine, that you are strong, that you can handle it. But little do you know what you have faced in the silence of your soul. This is the kind of anguish that Jesus knows deeply, the one that doesn't appear in the photos, that doesn't become a caption on social media, but that accompanies you every step of the way. Anna's pain teaches us something powerful. Not all anguish has a visible cause, and not all pain is understood by others. And this is where the spiritual secret begins. Because the world treats symptoms, but Jesus goes straight to the root. The cycle of invisible anguish that consumes so many hearts today cannot be broken with human formulas. It is fueled by untreated wounds, unspoken words, unseen tears. It is fueled by the feeling that no one understands, that God is far away, that heaven has become silent. But what few realize is that Anna did not give up talking to God, even without a voice, even without support, even being judged. She continued there. He persevered in prayer. And it was there, in that moment of extreme pain and spiritual exposure, that something began to move in the invisible world. Because every time you insist on seeking God, even without strength, even without answers, even without understanding, you are breaking a spiritual cycle that the enemy wanted to keep closed. Anna was being attacked by a type of anguish that many today carry, the pain of not being heard, of being ignored, to have a cry that echoes only within oneself. And yet, she remained at the altar. Now stop and think, how many times have you tried to explain your pain and felt ridiculed, discredited, invalidated? How many times have you prayed and felt like you were talking to yourself? How many times has your spirit felt bitter, as if life had been too unfair to you? Anna's story is a spiritual mirror for those who live surrounded by voices they don't hear, by people who don't see, by judgments that hurt even more. But what few say is that it was there, in that state of extreme pain, that God began to prepare the answer that would change her story. God didn't just hear Hannah's cry, He acted. He birthed something new from the womb of pain. And that is the spiritual secret. There are pains that are wombs of miracles. There are tears that water promises. And there are anxieties that are signs that heaven is about to intervene. If you have ever felt that no one understands your pain, that what consumes you inside has no name, no form, but is there every day, write now in the comments with faith, Jesus knows my soul. This is not just a sentence. It's an act of faith. It is a spiritual declaration that you believe Jesus speaks to you. Even in invisible anguish, He is present. And that word can reach others who are silent, begging for help. Write, share, and allow your pain to turn into ministry. But what if I told you that what you were taught about suffering is incomplete? Because the next story reveals something even deeper about this spiritual cycle that imprisons hearts. Something that can completely change your perspective. Because what comes next will challenge everything you believe about grief, faith, and purpose. And when you understand, everything will make sense. The room was full, but inside it there was a thorn. An invisible, deep thorn that no one saw, but that hurt constantly. Paul, that man who preached with authority, who faced prisons, persecutions, and shipwrecks, carried within himself a painful mystery. He himself called him a thorn in the flesh. It wasn't a temporary pain. It was something that insisted on returning, a cycle of suffering that accompanied him even in the midst of his greatest acts of faith. 3 times he asked the Lord for it to be removed. 3 times he cried out with intensity, with expectation, with hope. And God's response was surprising. My grace is sufficient for you. It wasn't a healing miracle. It was a miracle of support. God did not remove the thorn, but it gave Paul something that many of us cannot easily understand: strength within the pain. Maybe you are experiencing something similar, a suffering that doesn't go away, a pattern of sadness that returns even after prayers, fasting, advice, and attempts to change. Have you ever wondered why this pain is still there? Is it a lack of faith, or is there something much deeper going on? What no one told you is that there are sufferings that were not meant to be removed immediately. They are like spiritual mirrors. They show our dependence on God. And when the answer is not the miracle we expected, it is because heaven is delivering something greater: spiritual maturity. It's hard to hear, I know, but it is necessary. Because while the world says you need to be strong, Jesus says, my grace is sufficient for you. Grace does not eliminate suffering, but it enables you to continue even with it. Paul was a giant in faith, but he was also human, and this needs to be said. He felt it, he suffered. He wasn't an invincible superhero. He was a vulnerable servant who knew grace in its deepest form, and that is where the spiritual secret lies. Because many think that believing in Jesus means living without pain, but the real miracle is staying even when it hurts. It's getting up even when the thorn is still there. It's about continuing to love, serve, believe, even without understanding. Because Jesus speaks to you also in these moments. He doesn't walk away because of his weakness. On the contrary, it is in her that he comes closest. Paul heard the answer that many avoid accepting. Strength is made perfect in weakness. This phrase, which may seem like a paradox, is one of the greatest spiritual truths ever spoken. The more you recognize your pain before God, the more he reveals himself in your life. Now imagine this: Paul, in prayer, begging God, waiting for a release, and hearing a response that goes against what he expected. This is not punishment. This is love in the form of spiritual formation. Because there are pains that God allows not to punish you, but to shape you, to make you more sensitive to other people's pain, more empathetic, deeper, more like Christ. And that's why the cycle of invisible anguish is sometimes not broken with an instantaneous touch, but with an internal transformation that happens drop by drop. Many people give up in the middle of this process because they expected an immediate cure. But what if what God wants to give you now is not healing, but building? Not the relief, but the revelation? If this message is moving you, right now in the comments, "Even in pain, I continue." This is more than a comment. It's a statement against the voices that try to stop you. It is a spiritual positioning. Because Jesus speaks to you even when the thorn is still there. And he doesn't just see you, he sustains you. Share this video with someone who is living this same cycle and needs to know that there is still purpose even in pain. But that's not all. Because there is a place where even the strong hide. A place of solitude, echo and silence where many hearts are lost trying to survive the absence of answers. And what happens in that place can completely change the way you see the distance from God. Get ready, because what comes next will touch on a point that few have the courage to expose. And when you understand, everything will make sense. The cave was dark, damp, and cold. But what hurt David most was not the cold of the rock, nor the fear of the enemies that were chasing him. It was the feeling of abandonment, the absence of friendly voices, the silence of God, the emptiness of a heart that was once full of praise, now filled with a lonely echo. David, the same one who once defeated giants with faith and courage, now hid like a broken man, the soul of a warrior, immersed in invisible anguish. He writes, "Look to my right hand and see, for no one recognizes me. I have lacked refuge, no one cares for my soul." Psalms 142:4. A brutally honest confession. A prayer that doesn't try to sound strong. A suffocated scream that crosses time and finds an echo in so many souls today. How many people live surrounded by people and still feel alone? How many sleep next to someone but can't feel that someone really sees them? This silent pain, which eats away from the inside, has a name: spiritual anguish. And it is more common than you might think. David was hiding, but what he wanted most was to be found. Not by enemies, but by God. By someone who understood him. Someone who said, "I see you." Because the greatest prison is not always made of bars. It is often made of silence, of absence. To feel like not even God is listening. And maybe you are in that place right now. Even removed from the presence that used to be his source of life. He no longer feels what he felt. He no longer prays like he used to. He no longer sings like he used to. And not because he abandoned his faith, but because you feel like your faith has abandoned you. And here's the truth that almost no one has the courage to say. Even the strongest hide. Even the most believers doubt. Even those who pray the most at some point enter the cave of the soul. And it is at this point that the spiritual secret reveals itself. Because Jesus speaks to you, right there. Even when you don't feel it. Even when you don't listen. He is still present. The mistake that many make is to confuse the absence of sensation with the absence of God. But heaven doesn't depend on your feelings to act. God's silence is not rejection. It's preparation. While David thought he was being forgotten, God was creating a new chapter. The cave was not the end. It was the transition. It was the space between the call and the fulfillment of the promise. And that's why the anguish grows there. Because the enemy always tries to attack where he knows God will operate. When you're on the verge of a change, he tries to convince you that you've been left behind. But it's a lie. Because the cave where you hide could be exactly the place where God transforms you. If you have ever felt like this, distant, empty, without the strength to even pray, write now in the comments, "Even in silence I trust." That's not just a sentence. It is a spiritual weapon. Because every time you declare faith in the midst of silence, you are breaking the cycle of anguish that wants to trap you. You are affirming that your soul still believes even when it doesn't feel it. Jesus speaks to you, even when the world is silent, even when the voices stop, even when the cold of the cave tries to freeze you inside. And if this word is touching your heart, enjoy this video now as an act of faith and evangelization. This simple gesture can make this message reach someone who is feeling like David today, alone, forgotten, helpless. Your click could be the help someone is silently waiting for. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do so now. Be part of an army of hearts that are being awakened to hear Jesus in the midst of silence. But here's a question that few have the courage to face. What if what you're feeling today isn't weakness and but a calling? What if this tiredness, this emptiness, this desire to disappear is actually the preview of a new phase that God is preparing? What comes next will confront your deepest insights about giving up, purpose, and rebirth. Take a deep breath, because what you will hear now could be the spark you needed to reignite your soul. He was lying in isolation, too tired to continue. Elijah, the prophet who had faced the false prophets, who had seen the fire of God fall from heaven, who had heard the voice of the Most High, now begged for death. Beneath a simple juniper tree, a lonely tree in the desert, he huddled like someone who had lost everything, even the will to live. "That is enough, O Lord. Now take my life." 1 Kings 19:4. These words tear the soul because they don't come from a weak man but from someone who was strong for so long, until he couldn't anymore. How many live like this today? Strong on the outside but imploding on the inside. People who support the world on their backs, who are everyone's support, but no one realizes that they no longer have the strength even for themselves. Elijah represents all those who stood up to fight, but are now fallen, exhausted, just wanting to disappear. The scariest detail in this scene isn't the desert. It is not the request for death. It's the fact that Elijah was running away. Running away from a threat, yes, but also running away from yourself. Escaping from pressure, expectations, demands, running away from the mission. Because there are times when the calling seems to weigh more than faith can sustain. And this is where many people break down inside, when they can no longer pretend to be strong. When the body continues but the soul has already crawled under the juniper tree. Elijah didn't just want physical rest. He wanted to stop the existential pain. He wanted an end, but heaven wanted a fresh start. And here's the spiritual secret that many ignore. When you think you've reached the limit, God is just preparing the new starting point. God did not respond with judgment, did not respond with a charge. God sent an angel, silently, no fuss. One touch, a food, one water, and a loving order. Get up and eat, because the journey will be very long for you. Elijah thought the end had come, but God was just restarting the process. The invisible anguish that consumes you today may be precisely the point at which the sky begins to move something that you cannot yet see, because Jesus speaks to you even when all you want is to be silent. He doesn't expect you to be strong all the time. He just wants you to keep going, even if it's crawling, even if it's crying, because there are new beginnings that are born in the depths of discouragement. If you are tired, if you wake up without desire, if everything seems too much, write now in the comments, with faith and courage, "Even if I fall, I continue." This statement has power. It breaks cycles. It breaks the strength of exhaustion that tries to paralyze you. Jesus speaks to you. And if this word found your soul at the right time, share this video with someone who also needs strength to continue. Someone who might be under their own juniper tree right now. This message can save, can restore. And if you feel like this is speaking to you, write it down. Write with tears if you have to. But write, because your pain has purpose and God is starting something new in your desert. But what if I told you that there is a type of prison that has no bars or chains, but is capable of paralyzing dreams and freezing hope? And that even though we live for years alongside the miracle, there are still those who never experienced the cure? What you will hear now will dismantle mental patterns and reveal that what holds you back is not a lack of faith. It is something much deeper. Get ready, because what comes next will change the way you see your future. The scene was every day like so many others in that place. A tank surrounded by sick, paralyzed, blind, disabled, waiting, always waiting. A movement in the waters, a sign, a chance. And in the middle of them all there was a man. 38 years, not 38 days, not 38 weeks. 38 years waiting for something that never came. 38 years of looking at the water, at others, at the time passing by, while his life seemed at a standstill. He was not bound by visible chains. There were no walls around it, but he was immobilized by something even more cruel: wounded hope. When Jesus sees you, he doesn't start with a prayer, not even with an explanation, not even with a sermon. Jesus asks, "Do you want to be healed?" John 5:6. It seems like an obvious question, but it's not, because behind it there is a deep mystery, a spiritual key that many ignore. Sometimes the greatest imprisonment is not in the illness, but in the mind, in default, in the waiting cycle, in the belief that nothing will change anymore. This man had become accustomed to the brink of miracle. It was close, but never inside. He lived almost at the limit, always waiting for someone to put him in the water, always depending on a hand, an opportunity, a movement. He had become a spectator of other people's lives. The other's joy was the memory of his paralysis. And maybe you understand this feeling perfectly. Maybe your soul is paralyzed, trapped in a cycle where everyone seems to move forward except you, where life passes by but something inside you remains stagnant, a relationship that never heals, a purpose that never comes true, a faith that never rises again. And here's Jesus' question today: do you want to be healed? Because healing begins with an internal decision. Before the touch, before the miracle, before the change, you have to want it. Really want. Because there are those who say they want to be free, but they have gotten used to prison. The spiritual secret behind this story lies in the way Jesus acts. He does not discuss the man's story of pain. He doesn't ask why he didn't get into the water. He only gives an order: get up, take up your bed, and walk. Jesus did not wait for the water to move. He moved the sky. Because Jesus speaks to you in a way that breaks protocols, patterns, and invisible prisons. And that word may be everything your soul has been waiting to hear for years. You no longer need to wait for the scenario to change inside. You don't need to wait for someone to help you get up, because the one standing before you now is the one who has the power to raise the dead, who has authority over time, over pain, over history. The question is, do you really want it? If you are living this cycle of waiting, this pattern that repeats itself and leaves you paralyzed, write now in the comments with faith and surrender: Jesus, I want to be healed. Don't say this on impulse. Say it deeply, with soul, truly. Because this comment is more than a text. It is a spiritual sign, one step towards breaking through. And if that word touched you, click like now as an act of faith. This simple gesture can carry this message to someone else who is also stuck on the edge of a miracle, waiting for something that has already been released in heaven. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, do so now, because this content can be the food that will sustain you day after day until you walk completely. Share this video. Become a channel of healing. Because Jesus speaks to you and he is asking, do you want to be healed? But what if the true cure isn't in touch, but in exposure? What if the next miracle God wants to do in your life depends on you having the courage to show what you've been hiding for years? The story that comes now will confront what many avoid. And when you listen, you will understand why some pains are only healed when they are revealed. Get ready. What is about to be exposed will liberate much more than you imagine. She hid in the crowd. Every step was a challenge, every breath hurt. For 12 years, she lived on the sidelines, being avoided, despised, ignored. The woman with the issue of blood was not just a sick person. She was someone who had been socially ostracized. And all this for something she didn't choose. Imagine living 12 years without being able to touch anyone, unable to be touched. No hugs, no affection, no closeness. She was impure in the eyes of religion, invisible in the eyes of society. But in the eyes of Jesus, she was a miracle waiting to happen. The scene is drawn in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 5. Jesus was on his way to another miracle, surrounded by a crowd. But that woman didn't want to wait any longer. She didn't want him to see her. I just wanted to touch his clothes because I believed that if I just touched him, I would be healed. She was willing to do anything, even risk being stoned for breaking the law, to touch anyone who could restore her dignity. Now stop for a moment and think, how many people today live exactly like this? Full of pain, guilt, fear, but unable to say out loud what they are experiencing. People who remain silent out of shame, who keep quiet because they think no one will understand, who hold back their tears to appear strong, when in reality, they are broken inside. And maybe that's your case. Maybe you learn to smile with your face while your soul screams in silence. Maybe you're afraid to expose yourself because you've been judged too much. Maybe you think that if you tell people how you really feel, people will stay away. But Jesus is not like the others. He doesn't turn away from the pain. He approaches. He is not offended by your past. He cares about your gift, and that's why this story is so powerful. Because Jesus speaks to you even when you try to hide. The woman touches his clothes and is immediately healed. But Jesus stops. He knew that power had gone out from him. And then he asks, "Who touched me?" The disciples find the question absurd. The crowd pressed him, but Jesus knew that touch had been different. It was a touch of faith, a touch of desperation, a touch from someone who could no longer bear to live half-heartedly. She then introduces herself. Trembling with fear, he exposes everything: the disease, the years, the exclusion, the desperate attempt. And Jesus hears her. He doesn't scold her. He doesn't kick her out. He calls her daughter. Not sick, not unclean, not a sinner. He says, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be free from your suffering." Mark 5:34. Jesus gives her back something greater than healing: her identity. Have you ever felt this way? Are you embarrassed to even tell what you are experiencing? Have you ever been afraid of being rejected even by God? Have you ever felt too unclean to be heard? Then this word is for you. Comment now with courage: "Jesus, I no longer hide my pain." Write this not on impulse, but as a spiritual act. Because often the first step to healing is exposure. And if this message touched your soul deeply, share this video with someone who also needs to be reminded that God is not scared of our truth. Jesus speaks to you, even at your most vulnerable moment, even when no one else understands, even when everything in you wants to hide. And he calls you son, from a daughter, from beloved. But what happens when shame turns to guilt? When the problem is not what they did to you, but what you did to yourself? When do you not forgive yourself? The next story will show that even when we make bad mistakes, God's plan is not canceled. Get ready. What comes next will radically restore your hope. Pedro was there, standing still, in front of a lit fire in the middle of the cold night. The smoke rose slowly, but inside him, everything burned in deafening silence. He had promised that he would never leave Jesus. He had said with all conviction that he would die for him if necessary. But a few questions were enough. All it took was a moment of fear, of instinct, of impulse. "Are you one of them?" And Peter replied, "No, I'm not." 1, 2, 3 times. When the rooster crowed, his eyes met Jesus's, and everything inside him fell apart. He left there and cried bitterly. The sound of that rooster echoed in his soul like a judgment coming from heaven. How do you face the weight of having failed someone who loved you unconditionally? How can you bear knowing that you hurt the very person who gave you everything? This pain, this guilt that tears our hearts apart, is not strange to many of us. How many times have we said, "I'll never do that again," and done it again? How many broken promises? How many relapses? How many times do we fall into the same mistake, even after so many prayers, fasting, worship, tears? The truth is that there is a type of anguish that arises from self-accusation, from the look we cast on ourselves when we disappoint, to what we believed to be our essence. Pedro did not fail a stranger. He denied his best friend, the Messiah, and it broke him. But here is the beauty hidden in this pain. Jesus knew Peter would deny him. He had already said this at the Last Supper, and even so, he didn't avoid it, he didn't change it, he didn't despise him. Because Jesus speaks to you even when you disappoint him. There is a spiritual secret here that can free many people who live in cycles of invisible guilt. When Peter denied it, Jesus was being judged unfairly. But after the resurrection, Jesus went to meet him, didn't send a message. He didn't play indirectly. He prepared breakfast by the sea and asked, "Pedro, do you love me?" 3 times. 1 for each denial. But instead of condemnation, there was reconciliation. Instead of punishment, there was commission. Jesus did not cancel Peter. He restored it and more. He entrusted the care of his sheep to him. The same Peter who failed, who lied, who ran away, was chosen to be one of the greatest pillars of the church. Could your pain today actually be guilt disguised as weak faith? Do you condemn yourself for what you did or what you failed to do? Comment now with faith and vulnerability: "Jesus, I still love you." Write this as a declaration not of perfection but of humility, because he is not expecting impeccable faith from you but a sincere heart. And if this message spoke directly to the wounds you hide, share it with someone who also needs to free themselves from this invisible guilt. Jesus speaks to you, even when you think you have let him down beyond forgiveness. But wait, there is pain that doesn't just come from what you did, but from what was done to you. A pain that goes through nights and early mornings, that makes the soul scream even when the body tries to sleep. And the most impressive thing is that the Bible shows that even the righteous go through this. Get ready for a deep dive into a suffering that many experience, but few have the courage to confess. What comes next may touch the most secret things within you. Night had come, but for Job that didn't mean rest. It was another late night, another moment in which silence did not bring peace, but agony. The pillow, instead of comfort, became an accomplice to the tears that flowed incessantly. And the mind wouldn't turn off. It was as if thoughts multiplied in the darkness, creating labyrinths inside him, where each memory hurt more than the last. Job was not just any man. He was righteous, God-fearing, known for his faith, and yet he lost everything: children, health, honor, friends. But what gnawed at him most was something no one saw, that invisible torment that prevented him from finding rest. He said, "I have no peace, no rest, only restlessness." Job 3:26. A verse that, centuries later, still echoes like a silent cry from many hearts that continue to sleep in anguish and wake up worse. Have you ever felt this way? As if the bed were a battlefield where you try to defeat your thoughts, but they always defeat you? As if he lay down hoping for rest and received torment? There is a kind of pain that does not scream out loud, but consumes in silence. That doesn't bleed on the outside, but destroys on the inside. And the most distressing thing is when everyone around you thinks everything is fine, when they say you are strong, and little do they know that, inside, you already broke a long time ago. The restless soul is a dark place. And often, even though we are Christians, we don't have the courage to admit that we are tired of pretending that everything is fine. Like Job, we want answers, we want to understand, we want relief. But God's silence confuses us. And this is where the deepest spiritual secret lies. God's silence is not absence, it's preparation. Job was not abandoned, he was observed. And even though his nights were full of restlessness, there was an entire heaven working in his favor. Have you ever stopped to think that maybe your insomnia has an eternal purpose? That the tears that fall in the dark are collected by a God who works even when you think you are alone? Jesus speaks to you even when you don't listen to him. The pain you feel may be revealing something he wants to heal in you. And here's a reality check. Often what we call anxiety is actually the heart trying to live without fully trusting God. Could it be that your soul is restless because you are still trying to control what only God can solve? Job's journey was long, painful, full of questions without immediate answers. But in the end, when he was still in the middle of the storm, something changed. He said, "I once knew you by hearing, but now my eyes see you." God didn't just restore his life, he transformed him in the process. The pain that makes you wake up feeling worse today could be the beginning of a new vision of God, a vision that does not depend on what he gives but on who he is. If this word touched you, comment with faith, "Jesus, I entrust my mornings into your hands." And share this video with someone who also needs to know that their sleepless nights are not in vain. Jesus speaks to you even when the world sleeps, but that's not all. Something even more powerful is about to be revealed. Imagine that behind your appearance of strength, there is a soul that screams for help. What if I told you that even Jesus caught the attention of someone who was always serving, but inside was wallowing in anxiety? What comes next could completely change the way you deal with your own expectations. She ran from one side to the other, her eyes attentive, her hands restless, her thoughts racing. Martha was not standing still. It was serving. I cleaned the house, prepared the food, organized everything to welcome Jesus. But inside, his soul was collapsing. While the house was immaculate, the heart was falling apart. There was a silent scream trapped inside her. Why am I always doing everything alone? Why doesn't anyone realize the weight I carry? And then she exploded, not in tears but in bitter words before Jesus. "Sir, is it okay if my sister lets me serve alone?" Luke 10:40. Jesus' response was as direct as it was loving. "Martha, Martha, you are restless and worry about many things." Luke 10:41. And therein lies one of the most ignored secrets of invisible anguish. It does not always manifest itself in crying, but in unbridled activism. How many times have you caught yourself being Martha? Serving everyone, solving everything, trying to prove all the time that everything is under control. But deep down, are you begging for someone to notice the chaos that exists inside you? There is an entire generation overloaded with tasks and empty of rest. People who have a busy schedule but a desert heart. And the worst part? Many believe that this busy lifestyle is synonymous with spirituality, as if the more you do, the more God will be pleased. But Jesus reverses everything. He doesn't praise performance, he confronts excess. Because behind a lot of rush, there is a soul trying to escape its own silence. Is your rush just about productivity? Or is it fear of facing what you feel when everything stops? This is where the Holy Spirit reveals a profound principle. Rest is also faith. Pause is also worship. Martha was not corrected for working, but for turning work into an emotional escape. Jesus was saying, "You are serving me, but you have forgotten to simply be with me." And how many are like this today? Living for God, but no longer able to hear God. Preaching peace, but living in internal war. Smiling in meetings, but screaming into the pillow. Invisible anguish is this performance disguised as devotion. But Jesus speaks to you now and says, you don't have to be strong all the time. I am your strength. And Mary, she chose to listen. He chose to stop. He sat at the feet of Jesus. She understood that healing begins when you stop chasing approval and surrender to presence. Martha wanted to resolve everything. Maria wanted to be resolved from within. And Jesus did not remain neutral. Mary chose the best part, and it will not be taken away from her. This shows us that when we prioritize what really matters, no circumstance has the power to steal it from us. It's not that Mary was less responsible. It's that she understood that resting in God is not a waste of time. It is salvation of the soul. Have you ever stopped to think that maybe this restlessness you feel all the time is heaven's way of shouting, "Hey, stop, I want to heal you"? Maybe rushing is not the solution. Maybe it's the distraction that the enemy uses so you don't realize that your soul is asking for help. What if I told you that the more you do without stopping, the further you are from hearing the only voice that can calm your inner storm? If this word confronted you, comment now, "Jesus, teach me to stop and listen to you." This simple act can be the beginning of your liberation. And share this video with someone who lives on the run but urgently needs a moment at the feet of the Master. Jesus talks to you. And sometimes what he wants most is for you to stop running, so he can hug you, but wait. What happens next will challenge everything you believe about the line between faith and exhaustion. Because there is a man who loved God so much, but asked to die, and the divine answer was so different from what he expected, that perhaps it is exactly what you need to hear today. The people murmured, the pressure increased, and Moses broke. The same man who faced Pharaoh, who raised his staff and saw the sea part, now kneels with a desperate cry. I alone cannot carry all these people. It is too heavy a burden for me. If you really love me, kill me quickly. Numbers 11:14-15. These words cut the soul because they reveal something profound to us. Even the strong break. Even the anointed feel like they can't handle it. And this is one of the great mistakes of poorly taught spirituality. The idea that those who have faith never feel tired of life. But Jesus speaks to you now. Tiredness is not a sign of spiritual weakness. It is your soul's cry for true relief. Moses did not simply want to rest. He wanted to disappear. Have you ever felt this? That desire to disappear. Not because you don't love your family, your work, your calling, but because you've been carrying everything alone for too long. The body works automatically, but the heart is exhausted. And the worst? Sometimes the ones who help everyone the most are the ones who have the least amount of people to ask, "Are you really okay?" Moses was at that point. And if you are too, understand, even giants of faith pass through this valley. But what did God do when faced with Moses' request for death? He didn't reprimand him. I didn't say this is a lack of faith. He listened. And he responded with strategy, not condemnation. The Lord said, I will gather 70 men of the elders of Israel, and I will take away the spirit that is upon you, and I will put it upon them, that they may bear the burden of the people with you, and that you may not bear it alone. Numbers 11:17. This is powerful. God did not deny the burden Moses felt. He shared it. He didn't require more effort. He offered relief. This is how God acts when you reach your limit. He steps in to teach you not to walk alone. Does your exhaustion really have to do with a lack of faith? Or is it God's way of telling you that you need to stop carrying the world alone? How many times have you taken on a role that not even God asked you to do? How many times has the fear of disappointing people led you to bear much more than you could? He arrives. This cycle of invisible anguish needs to be broken. And the spiritual secret is not in resisting until you explode. It's recognizing that you need relief, and that relief has a name, Jesus. What Moses experienced reveals something that many forget. The true leader, the true servant of God, is the one who knows when to ask for help, and God didn't create you to live in emotional and spiritual collapse, pretending to be strong when you're actually screaming for help inside. The good news is that Jesus doesn't expect you to be tireless. He is the rest of the weary. He is the refuge of the exhausted. He is the God who shares the burden, who responds with solutions when all you have is a scream. If this message spoke to you, comment now. Jesus, carry this burden with me. It's time to give up control. Stop thinking that everything depends on you, and let the Holy Spirit breathe relief over your soul. Maybe you don't need more strength. need more surrender. And this begins when you allow yourself to be human before the God who understands you. Because the secret to breaking this cycle of invisible anguish is to stop trying to win alone and start trusting those who have already won everything for you. And here comes the most impressive part of this journey. There is a woman marked by a dirty past and condemned by everyone. But when she was thrown at the feet of Jesus, she found no judgment. She found redemption. What happens in this next story could free you from the guilt that has been paralyzing you for years. She was there surrounded by looks of contempt, insults, pointed fingers. There was no defense, there was no escape. There was not even room for explanations. The woman had been caught in adultery. Lifted from the ground like a trophy of sin by the Pharisees, she was dragged to Jesus, not seeking mercy but condemnation. The plan was clear. Expose the woman and test the Messiah. But Jesus speaks to you through this scene. The guilt that paralyzes you today could be the exact place where He will reveal the grace that lifts you up. She knew what came next. The law was clear. The trial was public, the stoning imminent. But in that crowd hungry for distorted justice, there was only one who had real authority to judge. And He, instead of accusing, bent down. Jesus bows, right on the floor. Silence the noise of shame with a gesture of supernatural calm. The Pharisees insist. Jesus stands up and declares, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw the stone." John 8:7. Silence. Shame changes places. One by one the accusers leave, until only her left, and him. And here lies the spiritual secret that many ignore. The cycle of invisible anguish feeds on unresolved guilt. You carry the weight of what you did, or what they left on you, and try to move on as if nothing had happened. But inside, it's stuck, unable to forgive yourself, punishing yourself in silence. The adulterous woman was the personification of this pain. Sin was real, but Jesus' love was greater. And when He looks at her and asks, "Woman, where are your accusers? Has no one condemned you?" She responds with a whisper of relief, "No one, Lord." And He adds, "Neither do I condemn you. Go away and sin no more." John 8:10-11. Is what's holding you back today really a lack of faith? Or is it a guilt that you've never dealt with in the light of Christ's grace? Because yes, you failed. We all fail. But Jesus does not define you by your fall. He invites you to live from forgiveness. He doesn't push you back into error. It empowers you not to repeat. This is liberation. And this is so different from religiosity that points fingers, shouts, condemns. When religion wanted to kill, Jesus decided to save. When everyone wanted to punish her, He wanted to restore her. When the world saw trash, He saw value. And maybe this is what you need to hear today. You are not what did wrong. You are what Jesus will do again in you. Condemnation may even have your name, but salvation has His blood written over it. The voice of guilt screams, "You don't deserve a second chance." But the cross responds, "It has already been secured. So stop living like you are doomed. Heaven has already declared, you are free." The cycle of anguish breaks when you understand that God's forgiveness is stronger than your shame. If this word spoke to your heart, comment, "Jesus freed me from guilt." Not because it's pretty, but because there is power when you declare it out loud. There is healing when you expose the wound to the light of grace. The same hand that wrote on the ground is now extended to lift you from your past. Don't resist. Take it and walk in freedom. But that's not all. Something even more powerful is about to be revealed. There is a story that shows that suffering is not the end of the path, but God's own process to take you to your purpose. A man's prison would become the gateway to destiny that God had prepared. What comes next could transform your perspective forever. He was there, forgotten, abandoned, wronged, not just by men, but in their eyes by heaven itself. Jose, the dreamer, now a prisoner of a dream that seemed to have become a nightmare. He had been sold by his own brothers, betrayed by those who should have protected him, falsely accused by a manipulative woman, and thrown into a dark, stinking prison with no way out. It wasn't just the cell that imprisoned him. It was the feeling of uselessness, the pain of being faithful and still suffering. Jose did everything right, and yet everything went wrong. How many times have you seen yourself in that same place? Doing what is right, fighting with faith, and yet it seems like life only punishes you? This is the most silent pain, suffering without understanding why. Because if Joseph had sinned, perhaps he would find some logic in the punishment. But he resisted the temptation. He chose to honor God, and even then, he ended up at rock bottom, literally. And what makes everything even more difficult is that in this type of anguish, time seems to stop. The days pass without news, the sky seems mute, Prison becomes routine, dreams remain distant, and the heart begins to ask, has God forgotten me? But Jesus speaks to you in the midst of this silence, and he says, I never abandoned you. I was just grooming you in secret. Genesis 39:21 reveals a truth hidden in the midst of pain. But the Lord was with Joseph and extended his kindness to him and gave him favor in the eyes of the chief jailer. While everyone thought Joseph had been forgotten, God was building within him a character that would endure the palace. Because the spiritual secret is this: prison was not punishment, it was training. And there are many people today confusing discipline with rejection. Could it be that what you call abandonment is not actually God's process of forming something powerful in you? Because there is no throne without a cross. There is no authority without process. And whoever skips prison never reaches his goal. Are you facing a dark season? A time where it seems like nothing changes, that dreams have died, that everything has stopped? Take a deep breath and listen to this. God is still acting, even when you don't feel it, even when you don't understand. Jose didn't know it, but every minute he spent in prison was moving the heavens in his favor. Because when the time was right, God moved Pharaoh's heart with a dream that no one could interpret, except that forgotten prisoner. In a single day, Joseph left his cell to become governor of Egypt. What the brothers did for evil, God used for good. Genesis 50:20. The pain had purpose. The prison had a destination. And the silence, in fact, was filled with the presence of God. If you need this answer, declare in the comments, even in prison, I trust in Jesus. Because when you write this, you don't just interact. You prophesy. You choose to believe that, even without understanding, God is still good. You declare that the process will not be the end of you, but the bridge to your destiny. Don't despair in the silence. God works best behind the scenes. And just as he did with Joseph, he will also exalt you before those who humiliated you. But only when you are ready. Preparation precedes promotion. And here comes the most impressive part of this story. The next character wasn't in a well, nor in a prison. He was in the tomb. And yet it was exactly there, in the most unlikely place, that God decided to show that it is never too late for hope. What comes next will challenge everything you believe about time and God's actions. When Martha ran to find Jesus, she was between pain and hope. It had been 4 days since Lazarus, his brother, had died. 4 days of silence, mourning, tears, and questions. And the first thing that came out of his mouth upon seeing Jesus was a veiled but deeply human accusation. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. John 11:21. Martha's anguish is the anguish of many of us today. The feeling that God arrived too late, that the help that we prayed so much to receive did not come in time, that he forgot us at the moment we needed it most. But is it really? Is God's apparent delay really a sign of abandonment? Or is it a strategic part of the miracle that is being constructed? Because what appears to be the definitive end in our eyes is only a turning point towards heaven. Martha couldn't see, but Jesus talks to you even when everything seems over. He's not late. He acts at the exact time when the miracle will impact more than just your life. It will transform the faith of everyone around you. The pain of feeling forgotten by God is one of the most intense. It's waking up with the weight of spiritual disappointment. It's praying without an answer, fasting without results, crying without visible consolation. It's seeing people being blessed while you keep waiting. And then dangerous thoughts start to creep in. Did I do something wrong? Is God punishing me? Does he love me less? But Jesus, upon listening to Martha, does not rebuke her. He meets her in her pain and says, your brother will rise again. John 11:23. In other words, it doesn't matter if, in human eyes, time has passed. If God promised, there is still life where today there is only mourning. There is still resurrection where today there is only silence. If this message spoke to your heart, comment, I believe, even if it seems late. That's the kind of faith that moves heaven. The faith that continues even when the body is already buried. The faith that still believes when everyone has given up. Jesus wept when he saw their pain, not because he was in doubt about what he would do, but because he felt their pain even before he took it away. He sees how much you held on when everything seemed lost. He knows how much this weight is hurting. But the miracle of Lazarus shows us that not even death has the last word when he decides to act. 4 days. That was how long he lingered. But this was also the time necessary for no one to doubt the glory of God when the impossible happened. There's something powerful here. Jesus doesn't just resurrect Lazarus. He does it in front of a crowd, so everyone can see that the one who seemed forgotten was, in fact, chosen. What if I told you that God's silence is not absence but strategy? That your testimony will be so impactful that he is crafting every detail with divine precision? When he said, "Lazarus, come out," it was not just a call to a dead man. It was a cry that crossed time, space, and spirit. And today he is also saying to you, come out of the pain, out of the doubt, out of the anguish. I am still the God of resurrection. If this word strengthened you, write in the comments, Jesus is not late in my life. This statement is a spiritual weapon against every accusation from hell that tries to make you believe that God has forgotten you. He doesn't forget. He doesn't get the timing wrong. He didn't lose control. Your Lazarus may be in the tomb, but that doesn't mean it's over. Heaven still has plans. He still has breath. There are still miracles, but that's not all. Something even more powerful is about to be revealed. The next story involves not just fear, but the kind of fear that paralyzes, the fear of tomorrow, and the way Jesus handled that storm can completely change the way you face yours. Get ready. What comes next could transform your life forever. The night was advanced. The waves crashed violently against the hull of the boat. The wind was blowing as if it wanted to tear the skies apart. The disciples were with Jesus, but fear still set in. They knew he was there, sleeping, but that didn't seem enough. Panic took over. Screams, water entering the boat, despair. Until someone runs and cries out, "Lord, save us, we are perishing," Matthew 8:25. And it is then that Jesus stands up, with a peace that confronts the chaos around him, looks at the raging sea and silences it with a single sentence. But before that, he looks at those men who followed him and says, "Why are you afraid, you of little faith?" Matthew 8:26. This question still resonates with us today. Why are we so afraid? Why does the future, which hasn't even happened yet, manage to steal our peace in the present? The truth is that the storm is not the biggest problem. What sinks us is forgetting who is on the boat with us. How many times have you felt like you were sinking in a sea of uncertainty? The anxiety about tomorrow, the fear of bad news, the terror of losing control. Is this constant fear really a sign of little faith? Or have you never been taught to rest even when the sky is dark? There are people who live paralyzed not because of what is happening, but because of what he can to happen. The mind creates tragic scenarios. The soul becomes restless. The body becomes ill. But Jesus speaks to you through this story. If he is in your boat, it doesn't matter how big the storm is, she's going to have to shut up. The spiritual secret to overcoming this invisible anguish is to understand that peace does not come from the absence of wind, but from the presence of Jesus. The disciples followed him, saw miracles, heard his words, and yet, at the first sign of danger, they forgot everything. And you? How many times have you doubted that he loves you just because the sea was rough? How many times have you believed that he slept while you suffered? But does Jesus really sleep? Or is he just teaching you to trust even when everything seems out of control? If this word spoke to your heart, comment, "Jesus is in my boat." This phrase is more than a comment. It is a spiritual declaration of resistance against the fear that tries to dominate you. He may not act when you want, but he never abandons you. And the most impressive thing is that, in that episode, the disciples were more impressed with Jesus' authority than with the end of the storm. Because when he calms the winds and the waters, he reveals that nothing in the natural world has more power than his presence. And here's the shocker. Jesus didn't calm the sea to comfort the disciples. He stilled to reveal who he is. Sometimes God allows the storm to come just to show you that you never had control, and that is a good thing. But what if I told you that the biggest mistake you make is trying to control what only God can lead? There is a type of faith that is only born in vulnerability. When the water enters the boat, when screams become prayers, when despair becomes an outcry, it is at this moment that the sky moves. Not because you screamed, but because he heard your heart before your mouth spoke. He stands up, faces the storm, and says, "Calm down," and everything quiets down. The secret to breaking the cycle of anguish is this: resting even in strong winds, trusting even when the sky is gray, believing even without guarantees. And you know what's more powerful? That storm was not the end of the journey. It was just part of the way. They would see greater miracles yet. There would still be healings, resurrections, transformations that would change the world. What appeared to be a shipwreck was actually training. What if the fear of the future you feel is actually the beginning of a new level of faith? If this message strengthened you, comment, "I trust even in strong winds." No matter how loud the waves are, Jesus' voice will always be more powerful. He's still on his boat, and it still has the power to calm everything around with a single word. But wait, what happens next will challenge everything you believe, because the next story reveals a moment where even the Son of God seemed to be completely alone. And it is in this abandonment that he delivers one of the most powerful messages in the entire Bible. Prepare your heart. What comes next may make you see your pain in a completely new way. The garden was silent, but inside Jesus a scream. Gethsemane was not a peaceful place that night. It was the most intense battlefield anyone could endure. He turned away from the disciples, knelt on the cold ground, and prayed. It was not a calm prayer. It was an outcry, a desperate plea. Father, if possible, remove this cup from me. Matthew 26:39. While his friends slept, he sweat drops of blood. As the heavens seemed silent, the anguish grew. And yet, he continued. Because even in the face of abandonment, Jesus did not run away from his purpose. How many times have you prayed and felt like God wasn't listening? Have you ever had times when you just needed someone to watch with you but no one stayed? The pain of being left, of not being understood, of fighting alone, is one of the greatest sources of invisible anguish. The pain of being surrounded by people and still feeling alone. Is this feeling just a lack of faith? Or is there a spiritual purpose even in solitude? Jesus was not abandoned because he did not pray. He was abandoned even though he was the Son of God. This deconstructs the idea that if you are spiritually strong, you will not suffer. That's a lie. The truth is that the closer to the purpose, the narrower the path. Faith doesn't eliminate pain. It sustains you within it. Gethsemane shows us that God's plan is not to free you from pressure, but to strengthen you in the midst of it. And sometimes, that will mean going through dark nights with no one around. If this word spoke to you, comment, "Even alone I remain with Jesus." Because it is in this type of surrender that the heavens move. Jesus prayed 3 times. 3 times he sought strength. Not because I doubted, but because I knew that to win spiritually, the secret was to surrender. Maybe your Gethsemane is this moment you are in right now, surrounded by silence, tired, begging for help. But Jesus speaks to you. Even when everyone sleeps, God is still awake with you. And here is the most shocking revelation. The place of anguish was also the place of decision. Jesus did not leave defeated. He came out stronger. He decided to carry the cross alone. But not because he was weak, because I was convinced. Gethsemane was not the end, it was the turning point. But what if I told you that the abandonment you feel today is confirmation that you are closer to your purpose than you imagine? People may not even notice your pain. They can sleep while you fight. They may leave you without an answer. But Jesus knows exactly what it's like to go through anguish feeling like no one is around. And because of that, he understands you like no one else. It accompanies you in a way that is not always visible but is real. If this message touched your heart, write, "I am not alone." Write it to yourself as a reminder. Write it as a statement of faith, and if you think that was the deepest part, wait. What comes next carries a kind of pain that not only marks the body but breaks the soul. It's the kind of wound that many hide, but that God insists on healing. Are you ready to see what almost no one has the courage to face? Because the next testimony could be the very thing that frees you from what has been holding you back for years. She was raped, ripped away from innocence, dignity, hope. Tamar didn't ask to be in that situation. She didn't put herself at risk. She didn't provoke it. And yet evil fell upon her. And the worst, after all, she was silenced, hidden, isolated in her brother's house as if she were the family's shame, when in fact the shame wasn't hers. The Bible says that Tamar was desolate, 2 Samuel 13:20. A woman with a name, history, soul, and yet she was treated like an uncomfortable burden to be forgotten. How many people live like this today, silenced by pain, not because they want to forget, but because they were forced to swallow in silence? This is the kind of pain that doesn't scream outward, but destroys you from within. It's the invisible wound that no one sees, but that bleeds every day. How many have their souls locked in a dark room, like Tamar, because of a trauma that they were unable to heal? Is this just a lack of faith? Or are we dealing with scars that the church refuses to touch? The truth is harsh. There are many Tamars among us, people who were abused emotionally, physically, spiritually, and then thrown into oblivion as if it didn't exist. But Jesus speaks to you. He doesn't ignore what they did to you. He does not remain silent in the face of injustice. Jesus sees what no one has seen, hear what no one has heard, and embrace what no one wanted to carry. While everyone told Tamar to shut up, God immortalized her in the Word. This in itself is a cry against the culture of silence. If this message is tearing something up inside you, comment, "Jesus has not forgotten me." This statement is not just a rant, it is a spiritual position. What if I told you that your trauma doesn't cancel you out? That the pain they put you through is not who you are? There is life after violence, there is dignity after shame, there is purpose after abandonment. God does not erase stories marked by tragedies. It transforms. He rewrites.
Highly betonge på bok ens bia stade the ball adim if they I debu lip tano yapoti ha.
Do you believe that he can restore what destroyed you? This is the question that can set you free today. Now hold on tight, because what comes next reveals the deepest emptiness of the soul, one that is not caused by direct pain but by the absence of meaning in everything one does. And what you will discover may shatter the biggest spiritual lie you've ever been told. Solomon, the wisest man in the Bible, who had riches, glory, palaces, and everything that the eyes could desire, ends up saying that everything is vanity. It wasn't a poor, bitter person who said this, it was a king surrounded by everything the world calls fulfillment. And yet when he stopped to reflect, he concluded, nothing makes sense without God. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Ecclesiastes 1:2. The pain Solomon describes is subtle but profound. It is the emptiness of living without direction. And perhaps this is the most invisible and most common pain of our generation, being surrounded by things, but with an empty soul. You wake up, work, talk, post, smile in photos, but inside you feel like you're just existing. No purpose, without a why. Have you ever felt this? A feeling that nothing you do really completes you? That everything has become automatic? Is this really a lack of gratitude? Or is it the absence of a real connection with the Creator? Jesus speaks to you, and he is saying now, whatever you are looking for in the world, you will only find it in him. The emptiness of the soul cannot be filled with distractions, with status, with likes. If Solomon, with all that, ended up saying that life without God is a meaningless cycle, why do we insist on seeking fulfillment outside of the Spirit? The truth is that many today feel empty not because they lost something, but because they never allowed Jesus to fill the center. That's why so many are tired of their own routine, because they live, but they don't live for something eternal. If this word confronted you, comment now. Jesus, fill my emptiness. It's not about religion, it's about the soul. Yours. The pain of purposelessness is silent but gnawing, and Jesus is ready to show you that even the simplest moments in your life gain the weight of eternity when they are lived with him. But that's not all, because what comes next will expose a truth that almost no one has the courage to admit. There are people who want to disappear because they simply can't take it anymore. And this anguish, if ignored, can silence even the last cry of the soul. Jonas didn't just want to change cities, he wanted to disappear. Erase yourself from your own mission, escaping the call, the pressure, the weight of being used by God. He arises not to obey but to escape the presence of the Lord. Jonah 1:3. And how many times, even knowing the voice of God, do we also try to escape? Escape from tiredness, judgment, demands, escape from the anguish that no one understands. And the truth is that Jonah's pain is more common than it seems. It is the secret desire to disappear, not because he doesn't love God, but because he can't deal with everything anymore. Have you ever felt this way? As if everyone around you is expecting something from you, but you yourself no longer know how to continue? Maybe you're tired of trying, of falling, of feeling too small in the face of a purpose that seems too big. And then the idea comes, what if I disappeared? Not from a place, but from the role they expect me to fulfill. But what if I told you that running away never solves? Because the place where God wants to meet you is exactly at the point where you are about to give up. Jonah thought he could hide, but God was already at the bottom of the sea, in the silence of the vessel, in the belly of the fish. He doesn't punish Jonas. He finds him again, because when you try to disappear, God tries to restore you. And Jesus speaks to you now, stop running. Not because he wants to force you, but because he wants to heal you. What pursues you is not your mission. It's the pain you hid beneath it. If this message confronted you, comment now. I don't run away anymore. Declare this as an act of surrender and courage. The desire to disappear is a cry for relief, but Jesus wants to give you true rest, not momentary escape. And this rest begins when you decide to face your pain with him. Because no matter how deep the sea you fell into, God still dives there to rescue you. But wait, what happens next will reveal an even deeper truth. There are people who continue to smile, pray, serve, but hide everything in the dark for fear of judgment. And this silence has been a muffled cry of the soul. It was night. The streets were silent, but Nicodemus's heart screamed. He was a Pharisee, a teacher of the law, respected, and yet there was something missing within him. A void that neither religion nor status could fill. So he went to Jesus, but it was at night. John 3:2. I didn't want anyone to see. I didn't want to be judged for seeking help. And this attitude, so hidden, reveals a pain that many of us also carry, the fear of being exposed. To admit that it's bad, that he is injured, who needs help even though they know the word. How many times have you swallowed your tears just to maintain an image? How many times did you pray quietly, ashamed to say you were weak? This silent anguish, this internal struggle that you pretend doesn't exist? Jesus sees it, and he does not reject your timid heart. On the contrary, it is in the darkness of the morning that he chooses to speak to you, because neither fear nor human judgment prevents Jesus from approaching. Nicodemus was not lost because he had doubts. He was getting closer to the truth. And perhaps you, even though you are afraid, have already taken the first step, and that is faith. Faith in the form of a whisper. Faith in the form of a tear that no one saw. Faith hidden but alive, and it is in this place, in silence, in vulnerability, in fear, that Jesus reveals the greatest of secrets. It is necessary to be born again. John 3:7. Because it's not about showing strength, it's about surrendering to be transformed. If you've ever felt this way, hiding in silence, afraid of being judged, write in the comments, Jesus sees me even in the dark. Testify with courage. Your pain no longer needs to live in anonymity. God is not impressed by appearance. He moves before the truth of his heart. And if that word touched you, click like. Not for myself, but as an act of faith. A click can be the beginning of light in the lives of those who are also trapped in the darkness of silence. But what comes next could transform your life forever, because there is a type of faith that is not born from strength, but from surrender. An imperfect faith, trembling, almost extinguished, but which still manages to shout, "I believe, help my unbelief." The crowd was excited, the boy screamed, fell to the floor, foamed, convulsed. His father looked at him with despair, helpless, crushed by an old pain, seeing his own son tormented since childhood and being unable to do anything. He had already tried everything. I had already looked for help everywhere. I had already prayed, fasted, cried. And now there before Jesus, he no longer hid the fragility of his soul. His words tore through the silence like a cry for help. "I believe. Help my unbelief." Mark 9:24. It wasn't a pretty prayer. It was not a firm statement of faith. It was a broken, sincere, real confession of faith in crisis. And even then, it was enough for Jesus to move. Have you ever felt this way? Kneeling on the inside but trying to look tough on the outside? Have you ever prayed and deep down thought it wouldn't work? I already said amen with my lips, but inside I could only think, does God still hear me? This pain, this spiritual fatigue, this feeling that your faith is crumbling, does not disqualify you. Jesus is not waiting for you to have perfect faith. He does not require you to ever doubt. He just needs a sincere break, a heart that even though it trembles still chooses to say, "I believe." That father was not religious. He didn't know how to say long prayers, but he knew that here was the one who could change everything. And maybe that's what's missing in you. Not more faith, but more surrender. Faith is not the absence of doubt. It's choosing to walk despite being afraid. It's about continuing to believe even when your soul is tired. And this is the spiritual secret that breaks the cycle of invisible anguish. It's not about proving strength. It's about surrendering weakness. Why Jesus speaks to you even when your voice can barely come out. He responds to even the smallest faith when it is honest. If this word touched you, write in the comments, Jesus, even weak I choose to trust. This is the cry of authentic faith. Faith that does not hide behind spiritual masks. The faith that cries out for help and trusts that the answer will come. Not because you deserve it, but because he is good. And now take a deep breath. Allow yourself to feel this message. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine Jesus looking into your eyes with love and saying, all things are possible to him who believes. Even you, even now, even in this state he is in. Why he doesn't wait for your perfection. He responds to your surrender. You made it this far because something inside you was screaming for relief. Because even in silence, his soul searched for an answer. And today you heard it. It wasn't just another video. It was a calling. A reunion between you and the one who never gave up on you. You felt in each story that you are not alone. He felt that his pain had a name, it had a cause, but it also had a cure. And this healing has a name, Jesus. He's not expecting you to be strong all the time. He just wants you to trust. What you've faced so far isn't the end. It's the beginning of something new. Because when you surrender weakness, he reveals strength. When you expose the emptiness, he fills it. And when you say, I can't take it anymore, he responds, this is where I come in. Jesus speaks to you. And today he reminded you that it is not the size of your faith that determines the miracle, but how much you are willing to be true to him. Therefore, before we move on to the final prayer, prepare your heart. Take a deep breath, because what is about to happen could be the beginning of your liberation. If you're feeling that tightness in your chest, that raw emotion, that urge to cry without really understanding why, it's the Holy Spirit touching areas of your soul that you didn't even know still hurt. Now is the time to make space, to really let Him in. Let's pray together. Lord, at this moment I place before you every person who has come this far, every tired heart, every burdened mind, every anguished soul. You know, God, what no one else has seen. You probe what is hidden behind every forced smile. You know the silent screams, the choked cries into the pillow, the "it's okay" that are actually cries for help. Today, Lord, visit this heart with your love. Restore strength, lifts those who are prostrate, breaks the chains of emotional oppression, heal the invisible wounds that the world ignores. It sheds peace where there was only turmoil. Touch where the soul bleeds in silence. Jesus, speak to each one now with power, with presence, with healing. May this prayer be a turning point. May something supernatural begin to happen from that moment on. May all nameless anguish lose its strength, and may the joy of your spirit begin to take space. Amen. If you've come this far, it's because God is working in your life. None of this was by chance. And now what comes next is even stronger. The video that now appears on your screen is the continuation of this journey. What you will discover in it could be what was missing for your complete liberation. Don't miss it. Something supernatural may happen when you click and continue, because there are answers that only come when you insist on searching. And you've already come this far. Continue, comment now. I made it to the end if this message reached you. Your comment is a testimony of faith and can strengthen other lives who are reading it. Share with someone who desperately needs it. Someone who is fighting in silence and maybe today finds hope through you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to the channel now. It's His way of saying, God, keep talking to me. Each video here is a seed of transformation, and your subscription is a step of faith. And to seal all this with the word, receive this promise. Call to me, and I will answer you, and I will tell you great and sure things that you do not know. Jeremiah 33:3. Now click on the next video. Don't leave yet. What comes next could be the answer you've prayed for so long.